Two tails, one head, yang yang. Three tails, old yin. Three tails, old yin. Two tails, one head, yang yang. 2 heads, 1 tail, young yin. Three tails, old yin. Our bottom or inner trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as solid, broken, broken. This is Zen Thunder. Thunder is shock, upheaval, and the spark of the new. In old Chinese belief, thunder slept in the earth over winter and erupted from it in spring, awakening living things into new growth. Thunder is our basic drive for renewal. He inspires initiative and decisive action. He is the stimulus that sets things in motion. He is the eldest son in the Trigram family, the first connection of heaven, potential, with earth, realization. Yang makes itself known here, emerging into the field and beginning to grow. Thunder belongs to the east and to spring. Our top or outer trigram for our primary hexagram will be read as solid, broken, broken. So again, Zen Thunder. Zen Thunder above Zen Thunder gives us Hexagram 51. Once our changing lines change, that being line 2, 3, and 6, 2, 3, and 6, our bottom trigram will transform from solid, broken, broken to solid, 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 which is Qian, heaven. Qian is superhuman cosmic law. Enduring, he determines the nature and development of all things, from the movement of the stars to the cycle of the seasons, to causing each individual seed to grow into its own kind of plant. Heaven is creativity in its pure form, the force that drives change and what endures within it. He confronts us with the truth and what it demands, both as the absolute law of nature and as the challenge of individual calling, experienced as an inner law. He is both the awareness of what to do and how to be, and also the power to act on it. Heaven is Father, found in the northwest, the realm between autumn and winter, when the buds set and the seeds fall to earth. And once our sixth line transforms, our top or outer trigram will transform into solid, broken, solid, which is Li, fire and light. Li is fire and light, both inner and outer. As an inner light, she is consciousness at its most lucid and unclouded, holding things together in the mind, perceiving their differences and connections, and discerning the underlying patterns of relationship. And as well as vision, Li is the light that makes things visible, the power to cast light on things, spreading clarity and the awareness of order. Li is the middle daughter, living in the south, the region of midsummer and the burning sun. Li, fire and light above Kuan heaven. Give us the hexagram. 14. We'll be getting the hexagrams, their titles from the Taoist I-ming by I-ming, written in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's nice and alchemical in nature. Hexagram 51, our primary hexagram. He calls thunder. Practicing introspection in action. And supporting hexagram 14, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Great possession. Mutual enhancement of strength and lucidity. Continuous renewal. Inward discipline. When we approach the I Ching to ask a question, that question will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. We will start by reading from Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, which is a nice introductory I Ching commentary, but still nice and profound. Our primary hexagram 51, she calls shock. Key questions. What must you change? No, what must change? What will continue? Oracle. Shock, creating success. Shock comes, fear and terror. Laughing words, shrieking and yelling. Shock spreads fear for 100 miles. Someone does not lose the sacred ladle and libation. The cool dragon picture. That was the oracle. Next is some commentary on that. Shock is something that stirs, rouses, and shakes you up, like an earthquake or a violent thunderstorm. In ancient China, heaven spoke through thunder, and this was an omen that the human world was to be brought back into harmony. Abruptly, your world is not working as you expect. The solid ground shifts under your feet, security slips away, and mental constructs shatter. Living reality has spoken. Shock spreads out in waves of contagious fear and hysteria. Suddenly, everyone is all too closely in touch with their own emotions and with everyone else's, and all are reacting to one another. It is a time to hold on to what you most value and take on responsibility for keeping it safe through the upheaval, like the priest who is charged with safeguarding the temple and altars from the past for the future. Consider what remains constant and true when everything else is in turmoil. This doesn't necessarily mean resisting the shock itself, so much as keeping a still point in the midst of the tumult of reactions to it. Then you never lose your connection with the creative power that speaks through the storms. Image. Rolling thunder, shock. A noble one in fear and dread sets things in order and is watchful. When the outer world is shaken up, the noble one is also inwardly shaken. He is wide awake now, quivering with awareness of the changes underway, and ready to take on responsibility for restoring life to harmony. Sequence. Shock follows from hexagram 50, the vessel. In the charge of the sacred vessel, none equals the eldest son, and so shock follows. Shock means new beginnings. In the family of Trigrams, thunder is the first son of heaven and earth, entrusted with the sacred vessel. As the old is overthrown and the new embraced, he stands at the gates and opens them to the new time. This brings both the emotional experience of shock and also the awareness of a sacred connection that continues and is renewed through upheaval. Pair. Shock forms a pair with hexagram 52, stilling. Shock begins, stilling stops. Hexagram 51 sets things in motion and hexagram 52 stills them. You are at a time of stirring and opening, yet the one who does not lose the ladle and libation is already keeping still. Our supporting hexagram 14 will put our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hilary Barrett also calls it great possession. Here's another cool picture in her book. Key questions. Given all you have, who will you be? How can you affirm and support what is good? Oracle. Great possession. From the source, creating success. Great possession means you are rich. Maybe in material goods, maybe in less tangible assets like knowledge, wisdom, power, energy, talent, or relationships. Whatever form it takes, you have something real and potential in your possession. The Chinese word for possession also means there is. So this is great being, as well as great having. What there is and what you are, as well as what you have. The ancient form of the character shows an outstretched hand, which may hold an offering. To possess is to offer. What you have is by definition what you can give. And what you have can give is great. This is pure potential, an opening to the source, and a promise of abundant energy ready to enter into circulation and become creatively active. Image. Fire dwells above heaven. Great possession. A noble one ends hatred and spreads the good. She yields to heaven and rests in her mandate. The stars move in their courses in accordance with natural law. A noble one has an inner awareness of creative reality and carries this through into insight and clarity in living. The greatness of the cosmos is that it works as it should. And so her task is quite simple: to allow it to be, remove obstacles, and work with it. Hatred would only waste energy resisting reality. Spreading the good aligns with the natural order. The sun does not struggle to rise in the sky, it just rises. In the same way, because a noble one assents to what is and yields to heaven, she can rest in her work. Sequence. Great possession follows from hexagram 13, people in harmony. Reaching out to people in harmony means beings truly return home. And so great possession follows. With harmony, beings come into their right places, true relationships form, and a flow of exchange, of having and giving, is set in motion. Exchange is wealth, and so great possession follows. The emergent power of a relationship, always greater than the sum of its parts. And back to our primary hexagram to read our changing lines, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements. They may not all agree with one another, but we'll take a gnaw on that and see what it might mean for us. Changing lines are 2, 3, and 6. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Changing line 3 has the general context, an emerging identity, facing a transition with fear or desire, resolution or indecision. And changing line 6 has the general context, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. So in our primary hexagram, 51, shock, changing lines, 2, 3, and 6. Yes. Changing line 2 of hexagram 51. Shock comes, danger. 100,000 lost coins. Climb up the 9 hills, don't give chase. On the 7th day, gain. Shock comes. There's nothing you can do about this, and to have things so utterly outside your control is disquieting in itself. Perhaps the most dangerous thing here is not what shocked you, but your reaction to it. When you lose something you value greatly, it's important not to lose yourself and go rushing after it. You probably cannot see the whole picture, and you need a far better guide than the fear of loss. So climb the 9 hills. Go to your source, where you have deep roots that outlast the shock and cannot be lost. Recover your self-possession and reconnect with your original intent. The world seen from here is so much bigger than what you have lost. In due course, the shock passes and the cycle turns. And though you lose what you had in mind, you gain something greater. And changing line 3. Shock revives, revives. Shock moves without blunder. Shock comes upon you, bringing abrupt change. Let it bring you to life and stir you to action, awakening your inner vitality. If the change leaves you bemused and in the dark about which way to go, then let the shock itself be your guide and move along with it. The patterns of its action are meaningful in themselves. Better to join with their energy than to resist them passively, as if reality were somehow a mistake. So respond to this shock as part of the fullness of life, and use it as a sign that this is time to act. And changing line 6. Shock twists and turns, watching in fear and terror, setting out to bring order, pitfall. The shock does not reach yourself, it reaches your neighbor. No mistake. There are words of marital alliance. Shock tends to create shock. Fear reacts to fear. And before long, you're tying yourself in torturous knots trying to keep track of it all. How can you cut through the turmoil and become effective again? Trying to conquer the unrest and impose order would be just one more reaction. Instead, among the chorus of panicking voices, find the self who remains untouched. Shock need not jolt you out of the flow of life altogether. You can reconnect, talking and thinking about ways to unite with the new and make it your ally. We will now read our hexagrams from I-ming's Taoist I Ching. He wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. Our primary hexagram 51, thunder. Thunder is developmental. When thunder comes, there is alarm, then laughter. Thunder startles for 100 miles, but one does not lose spoon and wine. Explanation. Thunder is movement, action, represented as thunder. In the body of the hexagram, one yang is born below two yins, symbolizing the presence of movement within stillness. Here, two thunders combine. From this action, you arrive at that action. From that action, you produce this action. 1,000 actions, myriad acts, are all this one action. Therefore, it is called thunder. This hexagram represents acting so as to proceed on the path, warily practicing introspection. It follows on the previous hexagram, revolution. Revolution involves gaining joy through illumination, refining metal by fire, removing old impurities. Removing old impurities does not mean forgetting things, forgetting the body, extinguishing the mind, and stopping thoughts. It is necessary to remove impurities in the midst of action in order to accomplish the task. This is because the Tao is alive, in movement. It is neither material nor void. We use worldly realities to practice the reality of the Tao, and use human affairs to cultivate celestial virtues, both striving and non-striving, comprehending essence and comprehending life. The endless work all must be done in the midst of activity. Therefore, there's a path of development in thunder. However, there is inner activity and outer activity. Inner activity means the movement of inward thoughts. Outer activity means the activity of affairs that come up. Inner activity is in the realm of self. Outer activity is in the realm of other. If inner activity is genuine, outward activity will also be genuine. If inner activity is artificial, outward activity will also be artificial. Superior people are careful about what they do not see, wary about what they do not hear. This means being careful and wary about inner activity. If there is no random activity within, there will naturally be genuine activity. The movement of genuine activity may go on all the time without causing any disturbance. Using this to deal with external activity, one responds without minding. Therefore, when thunder comes, there is alarm, then laughter. The coming of thunder means that within stillness there is suddenly movement. Alarm followed by laughter means initial carefulness and subsequent ease. One moment of goodness in people's minds, and the mind of Tao appears. This is heaven. One moment of evil in the mind, and the human mentality acts. This is hell. Hell and heaven do exist in the world. They are both created in people's minds. It is the good and evil, falsehood and truth of thoughts which distinguish them. When you have thoughts, if you can practice introspection, gradually eliminating bad thoughts and gradually producing good thoughts, after a long time of consistency, thought after thought all return to correct orientation, so that the mind of Tao is ever present and the human mentality does not arise. Filled with living energy, the real self sits peacefully in the center, tranquil and unperturbed, yet sensitive and effective. Whatever comes up, you are cheerful and calm, responding with good humor, not minding at all. Even if thunder startles for 100 miles, still you don't lose spoon and wine. A spoon is for eating, wine represents fine drink. When thunder peals over 100 miles, it is very loud and can easily startle people. If you don't lose your marbles when this happens, this means the vicissitudes of circumstance aren't able to disturb your balance. Because superior people are wary of inner activity, they do not fear outward activity. Being wary of inner activity means nurturing the energy. Not fearing outward activity means not agitating the energy. If one can inwardly nurture energy and outwardly not agitate energy, acting when the time is for action, not acting when the time is for inaction, accompanying the thunder, going along with the time. Myriad actions are all genuine activity. There is no impediment in action. Herein lies the developmental quality of thunder. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, the direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 14. Great possession. In great possession are creation and development. Explanation. Great possession means greatness of possession. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is fire, luminous, and below is heaven, strong. Acting strongly with lucidity, producing understanding in the midst of strength, growing increasingly illumined as strength increases, growing increasingly strong as illumination increases. It is therefore called great possession. This hexagram represents wealth with daily renewal, governing the inward with strictness. It follows on the previous hexagram, obstruction. In obstruction, yin energy acts while yang energy retires. One accepts the false and loses the real, obstructing the openness of consciousness, becoming darker and darker daily until the original celestial virtues are completely gone. If you want to restore celestial qualities, producing something where there is nothing, it cannot be done but for the path of strength and illumination. What is strength? It is the moment of pure truth, adamantly strong and unbending. What is illumination? It is illumining myriad things with open consciousness undimmed. If one can be strong, the mind is firm and the will far-reaching, cultivating every appropriate path and establishing every virtue, having such wealth in abundance. If one can be lucid, one can discern principles clearly and thoroughly, seeing surely with real knowledge, taking to whatever is good, reforming every fault, being daily renewed. Once one is strong and lucid, one has inner autonomy and cannot be moved by anything. This is real, true practice. It is like the sun being in the sky, its light shining on everything, covering everything. Nothing can deceive it. Yellow sprouts cover the earth. Golden flowers bloom throughout the world. Wherever one may walk, everywhere is the Tao. With the greatness of possession and the far range of action, nothing started fails to develop. We will now go back to our primary hexagram and read our changing line. 2, 3, and 6, which each have their own general context. Changing line 2 has the general context that heart's perception, the emotional center where you make and feel connections. Changing line 3 has the general context, an emerging identity, facing a transition with fear or desire, resolution or indecision. And changing line 6 has the general context, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. I'm going to show you this. You can screenshot it if you want. It's helpful. Our changing lines put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements. Our primary hexagram 51, shock or thunder. Changing line 2. Thunder comes, dangerous thoughts, losing valuables, you climb 9 hills. Don't chase it, you'll get it in 7 days. Explanation. Mounting strength with weakness, Arbitrary imagination gets too high, and one tries to do what one cannot do. This is losing basic sense and acting on dangerous thoughts, like losing valuables and climbing 9 hills. It is fortunate if you maintain rectitude when you are weak, not daring to act arbitrarily, even though you may have the thoughts. This is itself basic sense, without needing to seek basic sense anymore. Danger can be eliminated. Therefore, the text says, don't chase it. You'll get it in 7 days. This represents wariness of inner movement when weak. Changing line 3. Frightened by thunder, wary action is free from trouble. Explanation. When there is weakness where there should be strength, fearing one's own inability, one also fears that action will lead into trouble. Trembling in fear, inside and out, body and mind are incapable of self-mastery. However, if the will is strong in spite of weakness of constitution, one can approach people imbued with Tao and borrow their strength to overcome one's own weakness. Then one will be able to do what one couldn't do before. Therefore, be wary. By wary action, one can eliminate trouble. This represents being wary of one's own weakness and seeking the aid of others. And changing line 6. Sorry. Looking for something you lost made me think of something that I don't know where it is. But that is not the time now. All right, changing line 6. Movement uneasy, gaze unsteady. An expedition will bring misfortune. The action is not in oneself, but in the neighbors. There is no blame. Association involves criticism. Explanation. At the top of double thunder, inside and out is fear alone and no real action. Therefore, one's movement is uneasy and gaze unsteady. Uneasiness and unsteadiness mean weakness and incapacity. If one ends up only fearing, one cannot get far. There will be misfortune even where there was none to begin with. However, at the culmination of external action, the action is not in oneself but in the neighbors. So even if one was blameworthy, one can be blameless. One becomes blameless because the fear of people is bad. Because it is bad, wise people will surely lead one to goodness. Therefore, association involves criticism. This represents being weak and fearing others. In all 6 lines, there is a kind of fear. It may be inner fear or outer fear. It may cause misfortune or it may cause blamelessness. But none of them are the path of introspection by which good fortune is gained. Looking for fear for the inward without fear of the outward, being able to be careful about the beginning and complete the end, we find it only in the first yang line. So in practicing introspection, it is important to fear for the inward and not fear the outward. Fear for the inward means being careful about one's inner state. Not fearing the outward means manifesting it in action. If one is first wary and then cultivates practice, one cannot be disturbed by external things. Thereby, one can realize essence and make life complete, unaffected by ups and downs. And we will read the commentary section as well for our 2 hexagrams. 51, thunder. Thunder above, thunder below. Traveling thunder reverberates. Thus, superior people cautiously practice introspection. Thunder is movement. Above and below is thunder. This represents the movement of the sound of thunder, traveling from here to there, from there to here. When the thunder here stops, thunder elsewhere erupts. Thunder continuing upon thunder is the image of thunder. What superior people see in this is that errant thoughts arise wildly, another thought arising before one thought is ended, thought after thought continuing, like the movement of traveling thunder, reverberating unceasing. So if people are unable to practice introspection, they will injure nature and reason, abandon the real and enter the false, ultimately destroying their own essential life. Therefore, superior people cautiously practice introspection, striving to cause true mindfulness to grow and errant thought to vanish, not allowing the slightest defect to remain in the heart. This is because good and evil, fortune and calamity, depend on the movement of a single thought, which makes the difference between heaven and hell. One can only sustain good thoughts and get rid of bad thoughts if one is able to be cautious before the movement of thought and introspective after the movement of thought, guarding against dangers, aware of perils, not daring to slack off at any time. Sustaining good thoughts and getting rid of bad thoughts until all bad thought is gone and all thought is purely good, ultimately wholesome without any ill, then thought may be active all the time without one being hindered by its activity, that activity returning to the state of total integration with the celestial design. And we will turn next to our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 14, Great Possession. Fire above, heaven below. Fire is in the sky, great possession. Thus does the superior person stop evil and promote good, obeying heaven and accepting its order. Great possession means greatness of possession. Above is fire, below is heaven. This is fire in the sky. When the sun is in the sky, much is produced. The sun shines afar. Everything is under the sun in the sky. This is the image of great possession. What superior people see in this is that the nature of celestial order is one integral principle in which all that is good is ultimately assembled. This is basic great possession. But because of mixture with temporal conditioning, once cognitive consciousness comes into play, the primordial is damaged. From this point on, good and bad mix. Those with great possession come to have little possession, and those with little possession come to have nothing. Therefore, as soon as a bad thought arises, superior people immediately stop it. And as soon as a good thought arises, they promote it, obeying heaven and finding happiness in its order. If one cannot find happiness in the celestial order, it is because of not being able to obey heaven. Not obeying heaven is due to not being able to stop evil and promote good. If one can stop evil and promote good, eventually one will reach ultimate good without evil. With true sanity always present, one returns to the pristine state of completeness, which is the order of heaven. Then one goes from destitution to possession, from possession to greatness. Human life in the world has a mission, which alone is important. With this direction, there is life. Without it, there is death. If one cannot find happiness in this mission, this direction, this order, everything else is empty and false. That to which heaven directs humanity is only good. If one can find happiness in that command, then this is obeying heaven. Obeying heaven is the way to obey the command. Finding happiness in the celestial mandate is the way to find happiness in heaven. Having the direction of heaven is the greatest of possessions, but having the direction of heaven lies entirely in stopping evil and promoting good. Stopping evil and promoting good is illumination. Obeying heaven and finding happiness in its order is strength. Strength is the substance, illumination is the function. Open awareness, unobscured, embraces myriad principles and responds to myriad things. Through clarification of the quality of illumination, one eventually reaches ultimate good, wholly integrated with the celestial design, nature and life stabilized. No possession is more substantial than this. No greatness is greater than this. No external possessions in the world can compare with it. And now we will turn to James Dekorne's Gnostic Book of Changes, which I've left links to in the description box below. He has synthesized several I-ming commentaries into one helpful place here, and he himself is a practitioner of the Tao, and he puts in helpful editor's notes in various places. He calls hexagram 51 or primary hexagram shock/thunder. Other titles might be the arousing, thunder, the symbol of startling movement, shake, the beginning of movement, shocking, the thunderclap, action, motion, sudden change, surprise. A quote from D.F. Hook, the necessity to keep tranquil in the midst of upheaval. Judgment, leg. Shock intimates ease and development. When the time of movement which it indicates comes, the subject of the hexagram will be found looking out with apprehension, and yet smiling and talking cheerfully. When the movement like a crash of thunder terrifies all within 100 miles, he will be like the sincere worshipper who is not startled into dropping his ladle and cup of sacrificial spirits. Blowful thunder, success. Thunder comes with a terrible noise, laughing and shouting in awesome glee and frightening people for 100 miles around. The sacrificial wine is not spilled. This suggests that the holder of the sacrificial vessel is not easily alarmed, or else that he is very wise and able to distinguish between the apparently dangerous and the truly dangerous. Ritzema/Karcher, shake, growing, shake coming, frightening, frightening, laughing words, shrieking, shrieking, shake scaring 100 miles, not losing the ladle, the libation. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of a disturbing and inspiring shock. It emphasizes that rousing things to new activity, the action of shake, is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to stir things up. The image, leg. The image of thunder being repeated forms shock. The superior man, in accordance with this, is fearful and apprehensive, cultivates his virtue, and examines his faults. Ritzema/Karcher, reiterated thunder, shake. A chunsu, or chief son, or superior person, uses anxious fearing to adjust inspecting. Wu. One thunderclap after another constitutes hexagram motion. Thus, Junsi, the Junsi, or chief son or superior person, reflects and rectifies for fear of being wrong. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. His feeling of dread leads to happiness because he is thereby made to adopt proper laws for himself. The movement startles the distant and frightens the near, yet he makes the proper sacrifices the same as always. Leg. Shock consists of the trigram for thunder doubled. This trigram also represents movement and the eldest son. The hexagram therefore symbolizes a crash or peal of thunder, and combined with the idea of movement, shows a sudden change taking place in the kingdom. The lesson is the conduct to be pursued in a time of sudden change through an awareness of danger and the proper regulation of oneself. A successful issue is predicted if the dynamic first line can be superior to the two magnetic lines above him. It is in the idea of the hexagram that he should be moving and advancing. Although sensible of the danger, he is confident and self-possessed, so much so that he can calmly perform his religious duties during the prevailing chaos. This is proper behavior for the eldest son, who must eventually assume the duties of his father. Anthony. In the I Ching, shock means being subjected to unsettling events. It also means perceiving and reacting to these events. Perceiving in any of these changes that a new set of limits or deprivations has been placed on our life which seems to restrict or even penalize us. This sense of being projected by events into a sort of emotional trap is what this hexagram calls fate. Acknowledgement of this fate or trap and the imperative to find the way out is one of the purposes of shock. As far as the I Ching is concerned, there's only one way out: to undergo spiritual development. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. During sudden changes, adjust your tempo and move ahead, remembering that while conditions may alter, the goal remains the same. The superior man double-checks his premises, confronts his weak spots, and adheres to the rules and ideals of the work. The image here is one of a sudden dramatic release of energy, power, and force. To receive this hexagram without changing lines can refer to almost any abrupt, startling, or unexpected situation. Sometimes it is the oracle's way of saying, surprise! It can also be a kind of reprimand for asking a dumb or inappropriate question. The oracle is shocked by your temerity, ignorance, etc. In such instances, there is often an element of wry humor in the situation, usually at the ego's expense. On rare occasions, it is possible to receive this hexagram as a warning about an upcoming event which has no bearing on the question posed. Should you receive such an oracle, be extremely vigilant. As always, the advice to the superior man in the image suggests the proper course. A true test of devotion to the work is to maintain one's will under all circumstances. The world may be falling apart around us, but the adept does not ruin the performance of his sacrifice. The ego continues the work regardless of conditions and keeps a cool head under all circumstances. A quote from Proverbs 3:25-26. Have no fear of sudden terror or of assault from wicked men, since Yahweh will be your guarantor. He will keep your steps from the snare. Both Yahweh and Christ are what Jung calls God images, which exist in one form or another in every human psyche, whether it is consciously religious or not. The God image is synonymous with the self, and the implication of the above quotation from Proverbs is that as long as the ego remains devoted to the work, in I Ching terms, maintains the sacrifice, it is under the protection of the self. A quote from Chuang Tzu. The perfect man is godlike. Though the great swamps blaze, they cannot burn him. Though the great rivers freeze, they cannot chill him. Though swift lightning splits the hills and howling gales shake the sea, they cannot frighten him. A man like this rides the clouds and mist, straddles the sun and moon, and wanders beyond the four seas. Even life and death have no effect on him, much less the rules of profit and loss. And our supporting hexagram 14, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. I-ming called it great possession. James Dekorne calls it wealth. Other titles might be possession in great measure, the symbol of great possession, sovereignty, great having, great possessing, the great possessor, great wealth, abundance, having what is great. A quote from D.F. Hook often means things other than material possessions or achievement. Count your blessings, for they are many. Judgment, leg. Wealth means great progress and success. Blowfold, he who possesses much, supreme success. Ritzema/Karcher, great possessing, spring growing. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of your relation to an overriding concern or central idea. It emphasizes that organizing all your efforts around this idea is the adequate way to handle it. Woo, great wealth is primordial and pervasive. The image. Leg, fire over heaven, the image of wealth. The superior man represses evil and nurtures virtue in accordance with the benevolent will of heaven. Blowfold, this hexagram symbolizes fire in the heavens. When the trigram of heaven is above, whatever is below may be separated from it. When it is below, it indicates fusion or intermixture with what is above. The significance here is that the splendor of a very great man lights up the heavens. The superior man suppresses those who are evil and upholds the virtuous. Most gladly he accords with heaven and carries out its commands. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. Wealth shows the magnetic line in the central ruler's place and honored by the dynamic lines above and below. The figure is composed of the trigrams of strength and clarity. The central line of clarity responds to the central line of strength, eventuating in timely action. This indicates great progress and success. Leg, wealth means great havings and symbolizes a kingdom, family, or individual in a state of prosperity. The danger in such a position arises from the pride it is likely to engender. Here, however, everything is against that. The place of honor is occupied by a magnetic line so that the ruler will be humble, and all the dynamic lines will respond to her with sympathetic allegiance. The ruler's seat is in the central position of the trigram of clarity, and hence her strength is directed by intelligence, and all her actions are timely, like the seasons of heaven. Fire above the sky shines far, symbolizing the vastness of the territory of wealth. To develop virtue and repress evil is in accordance with the will of heaven, which is given to all men a nature fitted for goodness. Cleary 2. All states of being have this essence inherent in them and are indeed made of this essence. But all states other than that of complete enlightenment are out of harmony with this essence in some way. Buddhahood is when you accord with this essence. Wu. As the sun shines brightly high in the sky, both the good and the bad will be exposed. The responsibility of the Chunsi, or chief son or superior person, is to discriminate between them. He acts in accordance with the nature of goodness, the will of heaven, to enrich his life. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. The greatest kind of wealth accrues from furthering the work. The superior man manages his forces in accordance with the goals of the work. Wealth is the inverse of the preceding figure, union of forces. If the 13th hexagram depicts a process of uniting, the 14th might be seen as the completion of that process. To have one's inner forces correctly united is indeed possession in great measure, which is the title that Wilhelm gives to this figure. It is emphasized in the image that this wealth must be administered in accordance with the benevolent will of heaven, which is to say, the principles of the work must always guide one's choices if one is not to lose equilibrium and become pauperized by illusion. A quote from Tao Te Ching: "The superior man considers a rich possession of moral principles to be honor, and peace in his person to be wealth." We will now go back and read our changing lines from our primary hexagram, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here, some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements. Changing line 2 has the general context, the heart's perception, the emotional center, where you make and feel connections. Changing line 3 has the general context, an emerging identity, facing a transition with fear or desire, resolution or indecision. And changing line 6 has the general context, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Our primary hexagram 51, changing lines 2, 3, and 6. Line 2, leg. The second line, magnetic, shows its subject when the movement approaches in a position of peril. She judges it better to let go the articles in her possession and to ascend to a very lofty height. There is no occasion for her to pursue after the things she has let go. In 7 days she will find them. Wilhelm/Baines, shock comes bringing danger. 100,000 times you lose your treasures and must climb the 9 hills. Do not go in pursuit of them. After 7 days you will get them back again. Cleary, 1. We read that one. That one was in the other one. Wu. He encounters severe movements and presumes to have lost his precious possessions. He climbs up a hill that has 9 winding passes. There is no need to search for his possessions. He will recover them after 7 days. He climbs up to high ground to distance himself from the movement below. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. A magnetic line is mounted on a dynamic one. Wilhelm/Baines. It rests upon a firm line. Cleary 2. The danger of thunder coming is mounting the unyielding. Wu. Because he rides on a yang. The weak second 6 rides on the strong first 9 and finds what a perilous situation he is in. Leg. The peril in line 2 is suggested by her position immediately above line 1. The rest of the symbolism is obscure, and Chu Si says he does not understand it. The subject of the line does what she can to get out of danger, and finally, as is signified by the central position of the line, the issue is better than could have been expected. On the symbolism of 7 days, Zhongsu says, the places of a hexagram amount to 6. The number 7 is the first of another hexagram. When the movement symbolized by shock has gone through its cycle, things will be as they were before. Notes and paraphrases. Su. An uprising endangers the man. He accepts the material losses and ascends to lofty heights, inaccessible to the threatening forces. After the shock and upheaval have subsided, his property will be restored without his fighting for it. Wing. A cataclysmic upheaval can cause you great losses. Do not try to resist or fight the forces, since this is impossible. Instead, remove yourself from the dangerous situation. Become inaccessible. In time, you will recoup your losses. Editor. Symbolically, the symbolism is not obscure at all. The basic idea is to transcend your habitual responses and view them from a higher perspective. When things have settled down again, losses will prove to be illusory. A quote from P.F. Case in the Book of Tokens. Verily, destruction is the foundation of existence, and the tearing down thou seest is but the assembling of material for a greater structure. Deluded are they who say, man liveth by the mercy of the Lord. Know ye that the balance of mercy and severity is the continuance of every life, yea, and of this whole universe. James Dekorne breaks changing line 2 down into 2 possible succinct definitions, A and B. A new situation renders old methods obsolete. And B, detach yourself from your accustomed responses and wait for the situation to mature. Losses are imaginary. Now changing line 3 of Hexagram 51, Thunder or Shock. Leg. The third line, magnetic, shows its subject distraught amid the startling movements going on. If those movements excite her to right action, there will be no mistake. Wilhelm/Baines. Shock comes and makes one distraught. If shock spurs to action, one remains free of misfortune. Blofeld. Thunderous impetuosity. To emulate it at this time will not give rise to harm. The superior man usually acts calmly and carefully, but there are times when impetuosity serves a good purpose or, at the very least, does no particular harm. Lu. Thunder comes causing a terrified manner, but if one is cautious, one remains free of disaster. Wu. He is frightened and uneasy because of the movement, but will not incur misfortune for his undertakings. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Her position is unsuitable to her. Wilhelm/Baines. The place is not the appropriate one. Blowfold, thunderous impetuosity is indicated by the unsuitable position of this line. Ritzema/Carter, situation not appropriate indeed. Clary 2, the position is not appropriate. Wu, his position is improper. Leg, line 3 is magnetic in a dynamic place. But if she moves on to the 4th place, which would be correct for her, the issue will not be bad. Anthony, the shock of encountering our fate, which seems unbearably harsh, causes emotional trauma. It is as if we are suddenly and irrevocably put into a bad predicament with no options. This negativism, however, means we are still under the effects of shock. If we can withdraw from this negative view, we will see that there are workable and correct means out of the problem. We need to be open-minded in order that the options can become visible. First, we must keep still within, refusing to look at the negative images or listen to the voices of our inferiors. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. The startling strokes of fate bring mental conflict to the man. He should retain presence of mind. If he tailors his responses appropriately, he will overpower these external blows. Wing. An external blow of fate will put to a test your inner strength. Try at all costs to maintain your composure. Look for an avenue of change that will alleviate the danger. Editor. Wilhelm comments, the word Su, here rendered by distraught, denotes literally the reviving movements of insects still stiff after their winter sleep. Ritzema/Carter translates Su as regain vital energy, courage or strength, bring to life, cheer up, relief. Literally, herb whose smell revives weary spirits. The doubled character intensifies this quality. The image is one of groggy confusion during a time demanding decisive action. Wake up and smell the coffee. Wilhelm also mentions that the line has reference to a foreordained or fated situation, the shock of fate. The idea is that your fate is demanding that you get moving, that you wake up from your torpor and take action in accordance with the goals of the work. A quote from M.E. Harding in Psychic Energy, the marvel is that there is not a perpetual state of war within the psyche, for each of these elements is endowed with energy and so cannot die. Fortunately for our sanity, many of these irreconcilable elements lie deep within the unconscious, locked in primordial sleep. Those which may have stirred are shut away in separate compartments. But as life progresses and an increase of consciousness is achieved, the inner conflicts awaken, and the problem of reconciling the oppositions they reveal has to be undertaken as a serious and urgent task. James Dekorne breaks changing line 3 down into 2 possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, wake up and resolve your confusion. B, get a move on. Drastic circumstance, demand drastic responses. And now changing line 6, leg. The 6th line, magnetic, shows its subject amidst the startling movements of the time, in breathless dismay and looking around her with trembling apprehension. If she takes action, there will be evil. If, while the startling movements have not reached her own person and her neighborhood, she were to take precautions, there would be no error, though her relatives might still speak against her. Wilhelm/Baines. Shock brings ruin and terrified gazing around. Going ahead brings misfortune. If it has not yet touched one's own body, but has reached one's neighbor first, there is no blame. One's comrades have something to talk about. Blowfold. Thunder brings disorder and people stare about them in terror. Advancing at this time brings misfortune. The thunder affects not ourselves but our neighbors, no error. We are not to blame for the trouble afflicting them, but, as the commentary on this line indicates, they may think we are to blame and plan reprisals. A marriage causes gossip. Lu, thunder causes trembling and frightened looks, undertaking, misfortune. It will not threaten your own body, but it might your neighbor. No blame. There will be gossip about marriage. Ritsuma/Karcher, shake, twining, observing, terrorizing, chastising, pitfall. Shake, not tending towards one's body, tending towards one's neighbor. Without fault, matrimonial allying possesses words. Slofnacy, thunder is so clapping, looking so scared. To be upright is inauspicious. Thunder is not in his body, but in his neighbor. In going there is no trouble. In confused slander there is talk. Clary 2, thunder is faint, the look is shifty. An expedition leads to misfortune. The thunder does not reach you, but it is in the vicinity. There is no blame. Association involves criticism. Wu. He is wavering in mind and looking anxiously right and left. It will be foreboding to have undertakings. If he can prepare himself well, he will not be affected by the thunderclap that impinges on his neighbor. However, he will be criticized for initiating marriage. Commentary, Confucius/Leg. Amid the startling movements, she has not found out the course of the due mean. Though evil threatens, she will not fall into error. She is afraid of being warned by her neighbors. Wilhelm/Baines, he has not attained the middle. Misfortune, but no blame. One is warned by the fear of one's neighbor. Blofeld. That thunder brings disorder is indicated by the failure of the middle line of the upper trigram to win supremacy over this top line. Although misfortune arises, we are not to blame. Fear of our neighbors makes us cautious. Ritsuma/Karcher. Center not yet acquired indeed, although a pitfall without fault. Dreading the neighbor, a warning indeed. Clary 2. The thunder is faint, balance has not been attained. Though there is misfortune, there is no blame. Fear nearby is a warning. Wu. He is wavering because he lacks self-confidence. Despite the perilous situation, he will be free from error if he can learn a lesson from his neighbor. Leg. Line 6 is magnetic and must abide the concluding terrors of the movement. Action on her part is sure to be evil. If she were to take precautions, she might escape with only the censure of her relatives. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The man has not yet found a moderate course of behavior. He is dismayed at the startling events of the times. Action will lead only to evil under such conditions. He should withdraw, taking appropriate precautions before the shock has affected him personally. His associates may speak against him, but he should not be concerned. Wing. The times are full of shocking occurrences which bring disorder to all of society. You cannot combat the times alone, and all those affected are too confused to react appropriately. Retreat is the best course, although it may bring criticism from others who do not comprehend your actions. Anthony. We must not let shocking events cause us to vilify the sage, fate, God, or the people who have wronged us. Shock brings an end to the old, but also a beginning to the new, even though we encounter many dangers to get there. Meanwhile, we must withdraw from the negative effects of shock. Wu. If he can learn from the experience of his neighbor and rectify his personal life, he will greatly lessen his losses. Editor. The neighbor in the warning is the fifth line, described as coping with shock reasonably well, though unable as ruler to hold the entire hexagram together. Line 6 is advised to learn from her observation of line 5's troubles, to remain calm and stationary out of the fray. In other words, by analyzing the adversity of others, one can avoid making their mistakes. Another way of conveying the same idea is to regard the relative who might speak against line 6 as the third line correlate who is forced by her circumstances to take action. Because of this, line 3 is unable to understand why line 6 cannot support her. The clear message here is one of adopting an unconventional or independent point of view. Survival now depends on not following the crowd. Blofeld, Liu, Ritsuma/Karcher, and Wu are the only translators who mention gossip about marriage. Psychologically interpreted, this can mean stress connected with any synthesis of thought and feeling, perhaps a new attitude or belief. If this is the only changing line, The new hexagram becomes number 21, discernment, giving a hint that cold-blooded, dispassionate analysis is the best way to cope with a tricky situation. A quote from A. Douglas in The Tarot. The devastating impact of this fire can free the mind from its fetters and open the way that leads to the center. But if the conscious mind is not prepared, not strongly built on firm foundations, it may end in catastrophe. In psychological terms, the outcome will be dissociation, the division of the mind against itself. James Dekorne breaks changing line 6 down into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, forewarned is forearmed. Never act when confused. Differentiate the components of the situation, center your thinking, then act in your own best interests. And B, despite contrary input, psychological or social, observation, experience, and or common sense counsels self-protection. We will get a randomly card drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching, and in this time we will also try and summarize the reading. So our primary hexagram, thunder or shock, shows the two trigrams. Well, they're both Zen thunder. So the bottom is Zen thunder, the top is Zen thunder, and so there's lots of shock going on. It's not necessarily dangerous, but it leaves everybody stunned somewhat and trying to figure out if action should be taken or not. Our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, is hexagram 14, Great Possession. This is the trigram Li, fire and light above Qian, heaven. Heaven supports lucid awareness in Great Possession, and so because of that, the possession is quite great. There's strength and lucidity, and the strength supports it. So this shows that we have an abundance of lucidity or awareness, and we are to foster and support that and continue to have it thrive. Our changing lines 2, 3, and 6 of our primary hexagram, which put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself. They take precedence over all other elements. Changing line 3 talks about someone getting a higher perspective of the situation and not acting. They are to see the possible outcomes from a higher vantage point and analyze what can be done, and what they have lost will return to them once the cycle is over and a new cycle begins. Changing line 3 is cautioned not to act as well. Let me take a look at this actually, because I remember being a little bit confused by that line. The password on this got changed recently, so. Okay, yeah, James Dekorne says in the 2 lines, A, wake up and resolve your confusion. B, get a move on. Drastic circumstance demand drastic responses. So that does sound like we are to act. All of the lines are not very auspicious except for that of line 1, and we didn't get that changing line. Changing line 6 shows that the best course of action would be to look at the effect the shock has on our neighbor and what they are doing about it, or to kind of try and determine what we should do about the situation. And we can kind of learn a lot from how other people either fumble a dangerous situation and make it worse for themselves, or how they excel. And being that changing line 1 was the only one that was auspicious, the action of the 5th line, which is the one the 6th line is analyzing, isn't really auspicious. So we're to look and see from a higher perspective our shocking situation that stirs us, and not really move with the group or the crowd. We're to really, really take the time to analyze what should be done and how we can further the work, and not just have response and reaction after reaction. Having a higher view, and also from changing line 3, feeling the urgency and the need to take action, and analyzing everyone around, how people are reacting and what might be done better to get better results, is pretty much the best we can hope for. And yet at the same time, our supporting hexagram, Great Possession, shows that we do have an abundance of consciousness or insight, or the higher knowing of the self, to support us in what might seem at first like kind of an overwhelming shock of the circumstances. So getting a, let's take these two. Oh, it's just one. 55 from the Tao Te Ching. And my copy is by Jia Fu Feng in Jing English. I had it right side up, that might help. Oh, I turned it upside down. All right, chapter 55 of the Tao Te Ching. He who is filled with virtue is like a newborn child. Wasps and serpents will not sting him. Wild beasts will not pounce upon him. He will not be attacked by birds of prey. His bones are soft, his muscles are weak, but his grip is firm. He has not experienced the union of man and woman, but is whole. His manhood is strong. He screams all day without becoming hoarse. This is perfect harmony. Knowing harmony is constancy. Knowing constancy is enlightenment. It is not wise to rush about. Controlling the breath causes strain. If too much energy is used, exhaustion follows. This is not the way of Tao. Whatever is contrary to Tao will not last long.